but the long-time leader will no doubt be re-elected. To discuss this, I'm now joined in the studio by Nicolas Tenzer, a Russian specialist and chair of French think tank CERAP. Hello, thank you very much for coming in. So, as I said, there are 7 people running against Vladimir Putin. Could you tell us a little bit about these opponents of his and their chances of winning?
Well, there are absolutely no chance. No one has a chance, because basically you have 2 kinds of candidates. You have one candidate, which is Ksenia Sobchak, which is probably Kremlin-fabricated candidate, but still she has a very strong stance against Putin, and she is especially denouncing, for instance, the illegal annexation of Crimea, the invasion of Ukraine, and also Putin's policy in Syria, which is quite important. But still, I think that's a sort of, I would say, mock candidate, just to try to demonstrate that there is a true opponent to Putin. But when it comes to the other candidate, we have either far-right and nationalistic and xenophobic candidate like Zhirinovsky, from the so-called Liberal Democrat Party, but it's basically a far-right party. You have 2 candidates from the former or still Communist Party. One is backing Stalin, and also both are very, I will say, inside the system candidates. And you have some external candidate like Titov, from the liberal entrepreneur, but, he's really not known by the people. And I think the true opponent, basically, that's Navalny. And Navalny, of course, is private to run because of the elections. Because I think that basically Mr. Putin is afraid of Navalny, not because Navalny would have had a chance to win, but I think because if Navalny would have run, it would be able to, for him, just to capture about, I would say, 1/3 or 2/3 or 1/4 of the voters. And that will be a true danger for the legitimacy of Putin.
I was going to say, and in doing so, then that would really be destabilising then for Putin, who's been around. I mean, he was first elected in the year 2000.
Yeah.
If he's re-elected now, then because the terms are longer, 6 years, he would be in power then until 2024. But apart from Navalny, so like you say, he's not running, so he's not really going to be a problem for Putin. But what about the economy? Isn't that starting to be an issue for Putin in terms of him really convincing Russians that he's doing the best he can for the country?
No, but I think that basically there was a lot of sufferings because of the state of the economy, which is very, very poor. You have an increasing numbers of the poor people inside Russia, and you have absolutely no middle class. You don't have SMEs also in Russia, basically. You have just big companies, but big companies are not able to provide jobs, to provide wealth to most of the people. Of course, you have a middle class or upper class, in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, and maybe a little bit in some other cities, but you basically don't have. And if we see, the rate of the poverty, but also the rate of the inflation in Russia, it's really a lot of sufferings for the Russia, especially for the pensioners, for instance. The people who are going retired do not have a true pension. And I think from this reason, I think Putin is going less and less popular. If you see, for instance, Navalny rallies, you had more than rallies from Navalny with more and more people in about 100 cities in Russia. Normally, the cities were protesting before, that was mostly Moscow and St. Petersburg. But now you have all over Russia some protest. And of course, you don't have really serious opinion surveys in Russia because, for instance, the independent center Levada was registered as a foreign agent and is not able just to publish any more opinion surveys. And of course, if you are asking some Russian people just on the phone saying, well, do you like Mr. Putin? Of course, they are not confident to say no. So we don't have a true idea of the real popularity of Putin, in Russia, but it's certainly declining because of the very bad shape of the economy. Just we may add also that you had a lot of soldiers, dead soldiers, coming back from Ukraine, no coming back from Syria. And also that's a true problem for the Russians.
I was going to ask you about that conflict, Ukraine, Syria. It's also, so dead soldiers, it was also very costly, though. Do we have an idea of just how much of an issue this is for for voters in Russia, or if actually they find that, how can I put it, that they support Vladimir Putin because of his stance?
Of course, you have some people supporting Putin, certainly, because there is a sort of nationalistic mood in Russia, and you have also for the average people who do not have access to the social media. Of course, you have just propaganda in the main TV channels, like Russia One, for instance, just just basic propaganda. You those Ukrainian soldiers who are all Nazis, who are just drinking the blood of the Russian soldiers and this kind of stuff. So you have this kind, of course, of propaganda, which is very pervasive. But I think that most of the Russians just see the reality, and the reality is that the access to the health services is becoming more difficult, even if we compare to the Soviet area. And of course, they just many people do not have enough just to pay enough for their children to eat or to buy clothes and this kind of very, very simple things.
Do you think Putin will end up having to leave power because of that then, because of the state of the economy?
No, because actually you have absolutely no people able to replace Mr. Putin. Of course, you have Navalny, but Navalny is banned to run. And, in the inner circles, you was a sort of, of purge, just 1 year ago, with many people around Putin being fired, because just Putin do not want to have any competitor. And still Putin is just playing with all the very old and classical nationalistic resentments. Just see an interview just 2 days ago in which he were just saying some anti-Semitic stances, saying, well, maybe, for the meddling in the U.S. elections, they were not the Russians, but the Jews or the Tatars and this kind of thing. That's what he was saying. And you have also some people very close to Putin having exactly, and especially from the clergy, you have some people, having this kind of stances. That's what Putin is just playing with.
So that's his strategy, diverting attention away from the state of the economy.
Yes, for the state of the economy, the state also of the corruption, because we have also to add that you have enormous flows of capitals fleeing Russia. You have also brain drain. With a lot of intellectuals. I used to be, professor at St. Petersburg universities, 10 years ago, and I remember already, also in that time, you had a lot of people, including professors, sometimes being members of the NGOs like Memorial, who were just forced to flee because they had absolutely no future in Russia, and even for their own security and the security of their family, they were completely afraid. That's the reality of Russia, unfortunately, today.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Nicolas Tenzer, thank you for coming in a few days ahead of Russia's presidential election.